One Punch Man is often called a parody of shonen manga, but that's really not true. I mean, yes, it is true for the Season 1 material, but One Punch Man is obviously a lot more than the first part of the story, even if that first part is what made the series so iconic. Besides the fact that it's actually a seinen, there's something about One Punch Man that will always make it feel like a shonen manga. At its core, One Punch Man is a story that takes the all-too-familiar philosophy of shonen manga and applies that to the very process of making a manga. So in this video, I want to explain why you should read One Punch Man and answer one very simple question. What would happen if you took a shonen manga and pushed it beyond its limits? Be warned that there will be some minor spoilers for Seasons 1 and 2. Before I get started, make sure to comment with your thoughts on One Punch Man. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week in the next video. This week's comment goes to B2, who shared their thoughts on my recent Dr. Stone video. If you'd like more One Punch Man and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Now, before I say anything else about One Punch Man, I have to talk about the first thing that sticks out to everyone: the art. I'm sure you were amazed by the animation of Season 1, and later disappointed by the comparatively not-so-amazing animation of Season 2. But if you read the manga, then you'll see that the art is consistently incredible, and this is all thanks to the artist of the series, Yusuke Murata. In case you weren't already aware, One Punch Man began as a webcomic created by an author known as One. The webcomic was already popular, but then Murata began to redraw the chapters for Weekly Young Jump, taking the source material and applying his own artistic talent. Because as much as we should all appreciate the webcomic, One's original art style certainly leaves a lot to be desired. And what's awesome about this partnership is that Murata is arguably one of the biggest One Punch Man fans out there. The fact that he's so committed to taking the source material and improving it as much as he can shows you that he loves this story. In fact, he will even take breaks where he goes back and redraws his versions of the chapters, leaving a total of 3 One Punch Man canons beside the anime. As far as I understand, there's the webcomic, the original Murata chapters, and then the chapter redraws. Now, I'm sure there's an argument to be made in favor of each particular canon, but I've only read whatever is on the Viz app, and quite frankly, that's not what I'm here to do. Point is, this is a level of commitment to providing the best possible experience to readers that goes well beyond that of the typical mangaka, and it's partly why Murata is considered one of the greatest of all time. But another part of that is the insane level of skill that Murata is able to demonstrate in each chapter. And while I'm sure there's something different for everyone in terms of One Punch Man, there's really 3 things that seem to stand out the most. First, and probably the most obvious, is the art style, particularly in the way Murata chooses to design his characters. To be fair, this isn't something exclusive to One Punch Man. In fact, you can see it in plenty of his other work. But it's still part of the One Punch Man experience. And that experience is this great balance between simple, cartoonish designs and realistic details. Just as a quick example, look at this drawing of Goku and Frieza. It was drawn by Murata, but you could easily confuse this as a cover done by Toriyama himself. And the reason for this is that Murata chooses to draw a similarly simple and cartoonish art style, with just more attention paid to the finer details of the art. And this attention to detail is another element of One Punch Man that sets it apart from a lot of other manga. While I was reading One Punch Man, I was blown away by the ridiculous amount of deliberate choices Murata makes in each panel. Explosions and lasers actually look like they're radiating light. Blurring and angles are used to create a perfect sense of depth and scale. Onomatopoeias, which apparently aren't just a weird type of bug, are used in a way that actually makes them feel like the sounds they're designed to convey, instead of just filling up empty space. The great part is that this all contributes to the third thing that stands out about Murata's art, which is the way he draws the fights. And I hope you're not expecting me to make some kind of cliché comparison to JJK and its paneling, because quite honestly, the paneling is nothing revolutionary. Don't get me wrong, the paneling is great, but keeping in character with his art style, Murata uses a very traditional style of paneling, but then builds on that by making each panel of a fight feel as real as it possibly can. And this is because, on top of the amount of detail that he uses to make everything look real, Murata goes out of his way to draw as many panels as he can so that readers get a more complete idea of how fights unfold. The downside is that chapters can take forever to release and can go as long as 150 pages, but the upside is that readers feel like they're watching fights in real time. I'm not kidding, by the way. If you don't believe me, then go read Saitama's first fight against Sonic. Point is, if you really break it down to one idea, the beauty of Murata's art goes back to what I said earlier. In One Punch Man, Murata uses a kind of cartoonish shonen art style that is reminiscent of classics like Dragon Ball, but pushes it to the point where it's as dynamic and impactful as it can possibly be. But now that I've covered one iconic aspect of One Punch Man, it's only natural that I cover the other one. I already talked about how the fights look, but obviously art is only one element of a fight. The other iconic element of One Punch Man is of course the action. Now, like I mentioned, One Punch Man is often viewed as a parody of battle shonen, and just like any battle shonen, One Punch Man is full of fights. If you haven't noticed by now, I'm a big believer in the rule of 3, but as much as I try to do that with the action, I keep coming back to a single idea: power scaling. I can't help but argue that everything great about the fights, besides the art and choreography, all comes down to the power scaling, which is hilarious to say about a manga where the main character beats everyone with one punch. But that's actually kind of the beauty of it. So for example, right, let's use Dragon Ball again as an example. Some people like to criticize Dragon Ball for just going from like a Super Saiyan to a Super Saiyan 2 to, screw it, let's make him a Super Saiyan God. Not that I'm necessarily pushing that agenda, just consider it for the sake of argument. In One Punch Man, you know right away that Saitama is the ceiling in this universe, at least as far as we know. So while you would expect Saitama to make any power levels seem pretty meaningless, it actually allows the story to focus on building power levels that actually mean something. And this is partly thanks to the vast array of different kinds of abilities in One Punch Man. All too often in battle shonen, the power system pretty much defines whether or not you even have a chance in a fight. If you don't have a stand, magic, nen, or whatever, you're probably just wasting everyone's time. But in One Punch Man, it's not like that. It has clear power levels, but there's no one system of abilities that the power levels are all based on. There's robots, cyborgs, psychics, martial artists, so many martial artists. And those are just the normal ones. You also have guys whose superpower is wearing tank tops, a delinquent who just goes around hitting people with a bat, this guy who is somehow OP because he acts and fights like a dog. There's a million more that get even stranger, but I think you get the picture. With all these different abilities, it makes the power scaling in One Punch Man that much better. Because while one guy might be good at fighting, he might not be able to do anything against someone with psychic abilities, or a monster that can just rip its arm off and grow a new one. Now, like I said, there's very clear power levels that limit how much these different abilities can do. So while the scaling between characters within the same level is pretty balanced, if you're only a B-class hero fighting against a monster that could destroy the planet, odds are you're kinda boned. But even then, the fact that these thresholds are so clear to readers only helps to create tension. For example, in the fight against the Deep Sea King, heroes of increasing levels are defeated one by one. First, the lower class heroes try to beat him and get destroyed, but then the S-class heroes take him on and all they can do is just scratch him. So by the time Saitama shows up, a small part of you is kinda worried that he might have a hard time. Of course, we already know how OP Saitama is, but it's this carefully balanced power scaling in these moments where monsters and heroes get hyped up that leads to this great tension in fights. It actually means something when someone is stated to be an S-class or dragon level. So the fact that Saitama can beat all of them just makes that gap between him and the other characters that much more palpable. So even though you have a main character that should break the power levels, the fights are still engaging because of all the time that goes into carefully power scaling the other characters. But that brings me to the third reason why you should read One Punch Man, and the question I asked you earlier. What would happen if you took a shonen manga and pushed it beyond its limits? Well, think about everything we've talked about. The art that pushes a traditional style to its limits. A story that challenges the limits of the characters and their power levels on a regular basis, and opens with a main character who is beyond those power levels. What is there left to do? Won't that top-tier art get boring after a while? Is there even any reason to keep reading when the main character is already the strongest in the story? People like to downplay One Punch Man and say that it relied too much on that main gimmick, whereas one's other story, Mob Psycho 100, is way better because it's dark and personal and has a character that actually experiences conflict. To be quite honest, those arguments get thrown out so many times, it's like hearing a broken record. Not to say there isn't truth to them. In fact, I probably do like Mob Psycho more than One Punch Man. But that doesn't mean One Punch Man can't be profound too. It's not gonna change your life, but it still has depth to it. To explain what I mean, consider this scene with Tsuryu. Tsuryu is shown to be the strongest fighter at this tournament. The guy is clearly stronger than everyone else and calls out the heroes in the tournament, essentially claiming that calling yourself a hero is pointless when you're only so powerful and can't save everyone. But then later on, monsters crash the tournament and Tsuryu is left to defend himself. When it's shown that his seemingly unmatched power isn't enough to stop the swarm of monsters, and it looks like he's about to be killed, the two heroes he mocked earlier suddenly appear and take part in the fight. Tsuryu realizes that they could have just pissed off and asks them why they didn't. In response, the two heroes simply tell him that they stayed behind to help. Here we see that even the strongest fighters will eventually need someone to help them. Even when someone seems to be limitless, they still need some kind of hope for their future. And it's hope that drives the story of One Punch Man. Obviously, there's the hope that a hero will come and save the day. There's also hope for characters like Garo, that they can challenge the system and go beyond the limits that have been set for them by others. But there's also hope for Saitama. Even more so than Tsuryu, Saitama has godlike power. And this challenges the trope of shonen protagonists setting a goal and slowly working towards the goal throughout the story. Saitama becomes the strongest hero right away, so you would imagine that life after that is pretty depressing. He even says that ever since he gained his power, he started to feel pretty emotionless. But like I said, there's always hope in One Punch Man. Saitama's life doesn't just end once he's reached his goal, because it's really only the beginning. Watching Saitama is kinda like watching Superman. Not the cold, emotionless god that you see in the movies, but the warm, friendly Clark Kent that you see in the comics or in the animated universe. Even if he has godlike power, Saitama is still a friendly guy with a sense of humor who likes playing video games. And even though he's the strongest hero, Saitama still wants to save people. He saves that weird butt-face kid from the crab monster, he shows up to stop the Deep Sea King, and he even gives the heroes who lost to him all the credit just so the public will continue to believe in heroes. Saitama doesn't save people for the glory. He does do it for the thrills, but that's only because he'd like a challenge once in a while. At the end of the day, Saitama is just a chill dude who wants to save people. There's still good that he can do for others, and there's still a new chapter left in his story. Sure, you're confident that Saitama will always win a fight, but like I said earlier, there is always those few enemies that give you hope that maybe, just maybe, Saitama might find his challenge. Maybe he realizes that playing video games and eating hot pot with his friends is enough to make him happy. Maybe he finally decides that his life is perfect just the way it is. You don't know. But there's hope that Saitama will eventually find the meaning that he's looking for, whatever it ends up being. And that's why you continue to follow his character. So to answer our original question, this is what you're left with when you push a shonen manga beyond its limits. When you deliver insanely detailed art in each chapter, when all of the fights are full of over-the-top action, and the main hero is so absurdly strong that it makes working towards your goals just seem pointless. What you're left with is hope, with optimism, that same outlook on life that all shonen protagonists seem to have. The idea that even when you've reached your goals and it looks like your story is finished, there will always be a new chapter. And that's it for this discussion. Hopefully, I managed to give you a new appreciation for a series that too often gets dismissed as a story for meatheads. If you do end up giving it a read, then make sure to let me know how you enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed the discussion, then make sure to like the video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.